Welcome to today's episode of The Refresh, breaking news by AdTechGod. The Refresh is where we bring you the latest and greatest news from the advertising industry. Today's episode is sponsored by Azarion. Azarion is one of the world's leading full-stack digital advertising partners for 300 plus agencies and more than 2,500 brands. Their proprietary platform, Azarion Infinity, seamlessly integrates the capabilities of owned and operated DSP, SSP, DMP, and ad server technologies to drive incremental performance, value, and efficiency across the full marketing funnel. Azarion offers custom audience activation, leveraging cookieless identity data and contextual signals to engage users across all digital mediums. Choose between direct or PMP activation paths, leveraging a world-class team to deliver top-of-plan results. Welcome to today's episode of The Refresh. Before we get started, I wanted to announce some architecture media announcements. We are super excited for some of the great things that we're doing in the next few months. We have a great video series from the Advertising Forum planned in Las Vegas on January 6th to January 8th called Sweet Sweets, and a fantastic happy hour at the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Casino on January 8th, and this is in partnership with Magnite. We also recently announced our very first Marketecture conference, all about identity, that's planned in New York City on March 17th. You can learn more by going to marketecturelive.com. Tickets are on sale now. So that's not why we're here today. So first and foremost, thank you to everyone that is here. We have Tony Marlowe, the CMO of LG Ads, Scott Ensign, the Chief Strategy Officer at Butler Till, and Shiv Gupta, founder of U of Digital. Thanks, guys, for being here in such quick turnaround. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
So the reason why we're here today, obviously this morning, we had the Trade Desk announce their new TV operating system called Ventura, which is expected to launch in 2025. Their press release was great. They did a fantastic job announcing the product, but they have a lot of really strong language. And one of them is that this is going to be unlike any other existing OS provider, different than Roku and Amazon and Google, and that the Trade Desk is really trying to tackle the conflicts of interest by leveraging an independent type of product outside of content ownership. So I've received a ton of DMs, so many I haven't read them all yet. So I'm really happy you guys are here and I can ask you some questions. Tony, I'll kick it off with you. You're an OEM. You work for LG Ads, right? Fantastic TVs. I want to ask you, do you actually think that Ventura is like an operating system, or do you think they're going to take on this more of an Intel Inside strategy where maybe like the ad decisioning and the experience is powered by Trade Desk, but not necessarily a standalone operating system?
Well, I think at this point, there's more questions than answers. So I would say before I dive into the specific question, there are some hygiene factors that need to happen before you're even in the CTV ad business. So you need hardware. There needs to be, in this instance, literally a television. There needs to be software. So in this instance, they're talking about becoming and releasing this Ventura operating system. And then there needs to be an actual positive user experience. Without the user engaging, viewing, watching things, watching ad-supported things, there's no ad business at all. So all of those things need to happen more or less in sequence before you even have the conversation about advertising. In terms of, is it an Intel Inside type of a model? From what I understand at this point, it seems like they are going for the hardware partner, placing their true operating system inside the hardware partner. But again, probably more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah, I find it hard. They didn't announce any partnerships. I read it again this morning, right before this recording, and I didn't see them mention, we are working with an LG or, a Samsung or someone else. So they're obviously holding that close if there is a partnership in place. And as you mentioned,
I thought maybe that's why Tony was here.
That would be awesome. That would be really breaking news.
Apologies, I don't have any announcement, but I will say I was reading the press release and I found the Sonos CEO's quote quite interesting. So Patrick Spence over at Sonos, I won't read it all. I do have it in front of me. He said, "We're excited to explore the integration of premium audio and video, emphasis and video. Last I checked, Sonos is primarily an audio hardware company." I found that quote on the wire very interesting. Maybe it's a bit of an Easter egg as to what's going to come.
I'm pretty sure there was like an article a month or two ago that Sonos announced a TV and that they were partnering with Trade Desk for the Trade Desk to be the OS. So like when I actually saw it in the Axios article, I was like, oh yeah, okay. Trade Desk's first partner to be the operating system for any hardware is actually Sonos. So this all checks out. I understand why this quote is in here. Did I misread that like Sonos thing from like a month ago?
No, that came out. I think it was a leak or something.
Yeah, it was
right.
An unintended announcement. I don't know if it was a leak or a mistake, but it was unintended. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so I would imagine like that, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Like Sonos is putting out a TV at some point, and they've already agreed on terms with the Trade Desk that the Trade Desk is going to power the operating system. Now, also, if I remember that leak correctly, I think it was kind of implying that it was going to be more of an Intel Inside type of thing where Sonos was actually designing the front end experience for consumers and that the OS and the, I guess, software that was being provided by the Trade Desk was more the back end system. And so maybe that tells us a little bit about like how this is going to manifest itself in the wild.
Could be. I remember that article and when it came out, and I think that's when the buzz and the stir started kind of swirling in the industry. It is interesting for them to enter into the actual, I guess, operating system business. They're a software company, so I would think that getting into the hardware business would be really challenging. The logistics on its own are difficult. The scaling of devices in market is really difficult. It's not an easy business to get into, but the software business is really what the Trade Desk focuses on. So it makes sense for them to try to build a better software. I'm just curious to see how much better it is than the existing solutions in market. They make a lot of very strong claims, and that kind of takes me to the next question. So the next thing they mentioned in the press release was that this is going to help reduce the conflict of interest in the market, and that the Rokus of the world and Amazons of the world seem to have that. I tend to lean more towards this may increase the conflict of interest as the biggest connected television real platform in the world, now getting into the OS world. Shiv, how do you feel about this topic itself?
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting. I think, Trade Desk's ethos has always been, we are agnostic, right? That's our value prop to the ecosystem. We are the anti-walled garden. We are the anti-Google, et cetera. And, ironically, them getting into the OS game kind of makes that whole ethos flush down the toilet for all intents and purposes on the ad side, because now they are essentially going to be a walled garden of sorts in the DSP space, in the ad tech space. And so what's interesting to me is they're bringing the ethos maybe over from there into the OS space. And that's their strategy. They're good at that. They're good at telling that story. They're good at marketing against that narrative. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And if you think about the CTV market, we can sit here and argue, obviously, Tony, you're from LG, we can sit here and argue whether that narrative actually has any backbone in terms of value, right? But at the end of the day, we know that the narrative can resonate. We've seen it in the DSP space. And we know that in the OS space, for all intents and purposes, they're kind of right that they are the only-ish player that would not kind of marry software to hardware to content, et cetera, down the line, right? They would only just be playing the software game. So I think that part of it makes a ton of sense. I think it's going to be fascinating, again, to see if the narrative actually has enough of a backbone in terms of value. And sometimes that doesn't even matter, right? Like from a marketing perspective, even if the value isn't there, people are like, oh, agnostic, good. Oh, compromised or walled garden, bad. And so I think that's interesting. The last thing I'll say about this, and then I'll shut up, is I think that it's going to be really fascinating in terms of like the thing I'm saying about backbone and value. Their whole thing that they're saying in the press release with Axios is we want to give more value back to publishers, right? And we wrote about this in our newsletter like a couple of months ago when the rumor first came out. I think a lot of the OEMs, they have like set terms, right? And we've kind of like had, in TV and CTV and streaming, like this has been a legacy business, and like there's kind of set terms on like carrier agreements, rev share agreements, things like that. Trade Desk has an opportunity to come in and kind of like undercut, right, a lot of the traditional OS players, partly because, they're a new player in town. They have a whole other business that is very lucrative and it's growing really fast. And so they have the opportunity financially and economically to undercut maybe some of the OEMs in terms of like how much they can give back to publishers. But the other aspect of this that I think is really fascinating is the Trade Desk has the biggest spigot of ad demand out of any one of these players, right? And, like, obviously I'm not including Amazon and Google in that, but I'm including all the other like OS providers. They have the biggest spigot of demand. And so they're coming at this from a really interesting angle of like, once we turn it on, right, we're going to generate plenty of demand for the ads that we get our hands on. So maybe we have an opportunity to give back more and everybody make more money versus some of the other OEMs, the other OSs in the world that, like, frankly, like, ads are somewhat new to some of those companies. They're new to the ad game, and their spigot of demand isn't as big and as strong as maybe the trade desks.
And that brings me to my next question, which, we have Scott here from Butler Till. So obviously working on the agency side and working with some, top national clients and international clients that he works with. How do you feel about this? Do you feel that them owning not only, and I'm not sure if you are a trade desk user or not, but do you feel like them owning the pipes and owning the tech on device, empowers you and gives you more transparency and more reliability? Or do you feel that just gives more control and power to the DSP?
Yeah, we do work with the trade desk quite a bit. I think the devil is always in the details. So the how this happens is going to be really important. And when I think about the pros and cons of walled garden versus more open buying environments, I think we often look at those like two binary things, as if the only two choices that you have are going all in on a walled garden ecosystem or just like taking your hands off the wheel entirely and letting things go wherever they might. So I think if they do this right, there could be a happy medium here for buyers in particular. A lot of what we see on the buy side in terms of challenges with CTV is that there's just a huge lack of interoperability. So stuff's not talking, one thing is not talking to another. And you see that as a consumer too of things like CTV. There's huge problems with things like frequency capping, not to mention getting into like message sequencing or really meaningful measurement. And I think a lot of the stuff that they laid out in the press release makes a lot of sense for CTV. An application of UID makes a lot of sense if you're talking about CTV environments where you're pretty much always having a signed-in environment. And if you do have an open ecosystem that is going to be highly interoperable with a lot of other things, I think there's a huge value proposition there from the buy side. And I think it could open up new monetization strategies that I think have been a little bit constrained and limited in CTV because of where the incentives are and how things are set up. And so as a buyer, we go direct with a lot of premium CTV partners. We go through SSPs. We do a lot of curation of our own of CTV. And frankly, like the space itself is just, from all angles, a little bit of a mess right now. It's very much still sorting itself out. I see this as the trade desk's attempt to say, well, this is a huge market. Dollars are flowing here, racing here faster than a lot of the supply can keep up with. And so how do we start to speak order into chaos and control this a little bit in a way that's going to help everyone monetize and, of course, help the trade desk monetize and capitalize on something that's growing so fast?
Scott, I would just build on that and somewhat disagree with some of what Shiv was just saying before you. But if we merge those things together, so overall, I would say it's a savvy move. However, as a marketer, I'm not sure I would have positioned it as a content neutrality play, which is what you were asking about earlier. I could see why they made the decision. Sure, there's maybe some angles. I think it's a gross mischaracterization as to how the market works. Because at the end of the day, the nature of CTV is one where the viewer decides what they're going to watch. Oftentimes, they decide when they're going to watch, particularly for on-demand content, and how they're going to watch it. Is it subscription with no ads? Is it ad-supported? The user chooses where they navigate to in terms of content, and then the ad support follows. And so I know I was mentioning this at the start, but the key thing is going to be distribution. Are there these TVs with this technology in there? Is there enough scale in there? So if I was the marketer over at Trade Desk, I think at this early stage with so many question marks, I probably would have angled this as and this is Scott, what you were saying, look, we can more seamlessly integrate this into your broader buy. We can add CTV, our own homegrown CTV, into everything else you're doing. I probably wouldn't have taken aim at literally everyone else in the market.
That brings me to a question about the distribution piece, and then Shiv, sorry, I'll hand it over to you right after. Like, how would a trade desk actually partner with an OEM? How does it work? Is it a percentage of monetization? Is it a rev share? Is it the exclusive rights to something? Because currently, like the Rokus of the world take a percentage, right? They take a percentage of the revenue generated. It's in their contractual terms with these publishers. But how would an OS from the trade desk that is saying that, you'll make your money back, it's worth the investment because you're going to cover your costs, and it's written in the press release. How would they work with an OEM? And what are the potential business partnership aspects to this?
I could weigh in here. I think this might be useful to hear from everyone, but I would say the brand you mentioned is a good one. It's not an exact correlate, but what makes it really interesting as pertains to the trade desk's announcement is that they're a company that's been facing the death of the dongle. They've needed to diversify. They've needed to get viewers in different ways. So they've taken a licensing approach where they're getting their operating system often into white label or lesser known brands or lower tier brands might be a better way to articulate that. And it seems to be working for them to a certain extent. I think the long-term, success of it is yet to be seen. But I think that's probably the closest we've seen in the real world, in the wild, to this. So if the trade desk were to follow that type of model, they would essentially reach some sort of, as you alluded to, whether it's rev share, some sort of more specific dollar amount to get that operating system into TVs and dial up that distribution. Without the distribution, there's no business.
I have a follow-up question there. Tony, maybe maybe you don't know, I guess for the group in general. Like, I don't know the answer of whether, like, to AdTechGod's question, we know that when, let's say, Roku or LG feature apps on their platform, there's a percentage of the ad inventory or revenue that you take, right, as the value exchange there. I believe that's how it's done. Unless it's like a big app like Netflix or something where it's like they negotiate great terms or they don't give anything back. Like, I think what I know is that apps give some piece of their revenue or inventory back to the OEM. Now, when there are two parties involved, I guess, right? Like, are they divvying that up? So if, let's say the OEM is Sonos, right? Just because that's maybe the OEM in play here, and the OS is Trade Desk. And let's say the app that's sitting on that Sonos TV in somebody's living room is Pluto, right? Pluto, let's say the percentage is usually around 30%. They're saying Pluto's like, hey, we owe you 30% of our ad inventory because we're going to be on Sonos TVs and on your OS. Does Trade Desk and Sonos then figure out how to divvy that up? Or is there some other kind of arrangement? And I just don't know. I don't know how this works. I don't know the answer.
I think I'm going to choose my words carefully because, and the reason is not for protection. It's just there are so many edge cases. I won't talk in total, like this is how it works. I'll sort of say how we generally see things working, but there are, and it does vary quite a lot. So you can reach an agreement with whether it's an OTT player. You mentioned a couple of the apps there. Maybe there is some sort of inventory share agreement. Maybe it's a rev share agreement, or maybe there's simply nothing. Maybe it's a discussion like, good luck selling your TV without my app on it. And it can really go across any of those boundaries. But also don't forget, they're not the only advertising opportunity. So for us, within LG TVs, the primary FAST service is called LG Channels. It comes baked into the TV. In the US, there's like more than 300 channels. It's all free, all streamed, and there are ads supporting it. But if you are the OS owner, there are also premium native CTV ad units. So when you turn your TV on, usually they're in the media and entertainment category. So it might be a movie that's at the cinemas or something that you could stream, or an app like download Hulu, that kind of thing. And it's not only that, but that tends to be who leans very heavily into those placements. This is a method of monetization that's not really dependent on the app, not even really dependent on the content, and arguably is one of the most lucrative placements because it's where your experience launches. It's always the first impression. And so then it goes back to AdTechGod, to your statement earlier. Is it Intel Inside? Is it a true OS? That will make a real difference for how those native ads play out. For how those native ads play out.
Yeah, and you mentioned something also, Tony, that they've been, let's say Roku in particular, who's built in and is the operating system for, can I say tier 2 TVs, tier 3 TVs? I'm not sure, but more affordable brands, right? Like, it is what it is, right? Like, you have a Samsung, you have an LG, you have kind of these top tier players in the market. You have the more cost effective televisions in the market as well. And that makes sense. Like there's an audience for everything. There's a consumer for everything. And it's a great strategy. And I believe they're doing well. Sonos is actually a very high-end audio product. And it makes me wonder, are they not tapping that affordable market? Are they going after the high-end television sets? And is that the market they're really going after, which would kind of fall in line with the Samsungs and LGs of the world?
I mean, I would imagine that they're going after as big of a part of the market as they can get. I don't want to, Tony is probably much better equipped to answer this, but I think the TV market is tough. The TV hardware market is a tough, commoditized, highly competitive, razor thin margin market where the reason that Tony has a nice gig is that like those manufacturers are looking for monetization strategies outside of hardware sales, which are infrequent and again, very low margin. So I think there's a message in there if they do this right. This is why I think it's a pretty savvy move. If they do this right, there's a message for all parts of the value chain and a real meaningful value proposition. For the user, it is, I hate the operating system that I'm using now. It's too siloed. I have to hop around. Discovery is a real pain. I think Roku probably, in my view, has done the best job of solving that problem, but not perfectly. For the manufacturers, it's a revenue stream and a potential to monetize demand that they don't necessarily have access to now, meaning the trade desk, huge demand. Obviously, we know what's in it for the trade desk, finding a destination for all of that demand that's reliable, measurable, scalable, et cetera. And for the buy side, I think that the value proposition, as we've talked about, is and should be, this is a place where you can buy premium CTV content in a reliable way, in a way that gives you access to consistent measurement across apps, across content, across devices. Again, I think in a lot of ways, it seems like a little bit of an odd thing and a stretch for them to have a consumer software product, an operating system. But if you think about what's possible here with this exploding category, I mean, the way CTV is exploding, it's causing market irrationalities that we're all experiencing right now. Like CPMs are through the roof in CTV to the degree that it's sending some people back to, screaming back to the safety of linear TV in terms of cost effectiveness. That's how bad it's gotten. I think the trade desk is saying it doesn't have to be this way. Like we could open this up and make this possible, which of course does more than just monetize current demand. It's a demand generation strategy at the same time. A better CTV experience for the consumer is going to create more supply, which is going to expand this market in ways that it needs to keep up with that demand curve.
Yes, Scott, I completely agree. And I might add to it. I think very astute. You said, hey, hardware, low margin business. It's a high volume, low margin business, completely accurate. The margins are on the ad side. Now, I think the only thing that I would add, I completely agree with your sentiment, is the one thing I would add is that it's going to be a somewhat difficult market to crack. So if you take the top 4 or 5 OSs, and it depends on whose data you believe, so I'll give you ranges because they're all a little different, but you're anywhere between 75 to 80% of the market share in the US of those top 5. And then it starts to get real long tail real quick after that. And so, new entrant, sure, maybe you could pick up a few points of market share. I agree, Sonos is a great brand. I've known and loved them for a long time. I think a lot of consumers have. Can they deliver the experience? Maybe there's some faith there. But how much opportunity, what percentage of the market could they realistically rapidly get? Again, I don't know the answer to that, but if I'm over there at Trade Desk, I'm asking those questions.
It also makes me wonder, pressure builds diamonds. And is this what we needed? Like in the operating system world, like did we need this type of pressure across OEMs, across the Rokus, across the LGs and Samsungs in the world to really step back, take a look at the user experience, understand the user experience and have a better user experience? Maybe we needed someone to come in and disrupt a little bit and say, hey, you know what? We want this and we know that this is going to be the future. We know it's the present and it's only going to grow. We need to change the way the user experience is and improve on it. I don't know, but I feel like a new entrant into the space is usually a good thing because it causes quite a bit of pressure to improve on the existing situation.
I have more questions than I do have answers. The other thing I was going to, so quick thought on that, ATG, is I think you're right. A new entrant is good, more competition, better products. I do think like the consumer experience on the software side of this is like very commoditized today. Like I personally have a Roku in my house. I have an LG TV. I'm looking at you, Tony. It's great. Love that. And then I have a Google TV thing, whatever the hell they call their thing, their dongle thing. And honestly, I don't care. Like, I don't care which TV I'm on. It all feels the same. Like, they all have a menu with little tiles, and I scroll through and I pick an app and I watch some stuff, right? So, like, to me, the consumer side of this is already pretty commoditized. What matters is the back end. And that's what I think Trade Desk is attacking is like publisher monetization, especially right now with the emergence of CTV, is hard. It's confusing. It's fragmented to the point that Scott was making. And if Trade Desk can create more value and bring more value to the ecosystem through their spigot of demand, through better rev share partnerships with publishers, through a consolidation into an omni-channel platform. So CTV is not living on an island anymore, and it's part of a larger kind of digital strategy. Well, I think that's positive for everybody. So like, I like it. I think the one thing we just have to be like honest and clear about is the Trade Desk, first of all, needs to stop saying it's agnostic. Like that needs to go away. Please stop telling us you're the champions of the open internet and agnostic and blah, 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 blah. That is dead. Please stop. And that's okay because I think it's a good strategy. And I think the other thing that we need to see, right, play out is Trade Desk going to be able to get traction with OEMs? And Tony, to the point you're making, there's only long tail for them to go after right now, right? It's Sony, it's Westinghouse, it's Hisense. It's like these guys, and some of those guys are already like, nope, we've got our own thing, or like we've already been spoken for. But I think they're going to have to like take little bits, and it's going to take time, and they're going to have to crack away at it. And over time, if they can demonstrate like, hey, look how much more money Sony is making right now by using our OS versus, this other OS. And this is our case study. And now, hey, more OSs are jumping on board, more OS. Like that, it's going to be a journey for them. But we're going to have to see that journey play out, and we're going to have to see some successes early on for us to know that like they have an opportunity here and they can get traction.
I would agree. And then the only thing, I actually think there's a lot of really astute, accurate things in what you just said. And I think the only thing I would add goes to ATG's question about pressure, a new entrant into the market. I would sort of flip that. I actually believe we are already feeling the pressure from the user. The viewer wants an increased experience. Maybe I could do a quiz on you guys. We've got some data, but how long do you think it takes between turning your TV on, and this is any brand of TV, you're a CTV user, turning it on and landing on the content you're going to watch in the US? How many minutes?
12?
It depends a lot on the context, because a lot of times I know what I want to watch when I turn on the TV. But if it's like really discovery mode, I would say 10 to 15 minutes probably.
Right on. Well, you're both right in there. Our data shows around 11 and a half minutes, just over actually.
Oh, I lose. Price is right. I lose by the price.
What's that? The closest without going over? That's funny.
Yeah. That's right.
So because of that, we're feeling the pressure to increase that discoverability, right? And we had so the operating system on all modern LG TVs is called WebOS. We had our second ever WebOS summit in Korea earlier in the year. And one of the big things that was announced is the future intended integration of AI into discoverability. And I think it's really key because right now that a lot of that discoverability lives at that OTT app level. So it might be Scott, because you watched A in Netflix says you like B, C, D, E. And it kind of does the same for Hulu, et cetera, et cetera. What if we fast forward to a world where using AI across the totality of your viewing, whether it's subscription, whether it's free, everything you have access to at that home screen glass level, it says, okay, because of everything you watch, here's some stuff that you have access to that you might like. That creates a better user experience. That has a lot of knock-on effects that are positive for the ultimate advertiser media planner. And I think, AdTechGod, you're right. The pressure pushes us to get better and better. I feel until now that really it's been the end user that's been driving that pressure. And then obviously on the B2B side, we have OEM competitors as well. But even then, the duplicated reach between us and the other top OEMs is low single-digit %. You either have an LG on the wall or you have a different brand on the wall. You very rarely have both. And that's really our business. So I guess that's a long way of saying I do agree that pressure pushes us forward. I just see it more coming from the consumer.
I totally agree with that, Tony. And I think that's right on because yes, Shiva, the people understand the rules of the game right now. How do you do it? There's a lot of kind of sea of sameness in the streaming experience, and you go from your LG, which the old Palm Pilot WebOS operating system. I'm nerdy enough to remember that.
There you go.
I even had an HP tablet that had that operating system on it at one point. Moving from that to Roku to my Vizio TV, it might all feel the same. But I do think you're exactly right. There is room for innovation in the customer experience. How many times, a lot of my discovery is happening outside of the TV OS because there's just not great options within it. Like, how many Google searches do you find for best family movies on Netflix, best horror movies on Max, or best streaming movies in general? Like, a lot of that discovery could be, as you're saying, Tony, part of the experience. And I think consumers, they haven't seen a great experience yet. They don't know what they don't know. I think the kind of iPhone Tesla of this category is yet to be invented. And if I were the trade desk, that's what I would be looking to put out there and create some consumer demand for something better.
Hey, Tony, I have a two-part question for you, if you don't mind.
Right on. Okay, let's go.
Okay. Well, part one, do you guys sell LG inventory through the trade desk at all today, through private deals, programmatic guaranteed deals, et cetera?
The way we think about it is just being DSP agnostic. So we do work with the trade desk, but unlike some of our cohorts, we don't have, we're agnostic. Bring your own DSP is the way we think about it.
Does this affect that at all?
I don't think so. I think that we still have a strong partnership. Our most recent announcement with the trade desk related to UID 2.0, bringing that into our ecosystem. I think unless something really drastically changes in terms of their aspirations as stated aspirations, I think this is a savvy move from the trade desk. I think if you're over there, you start to think about how you can capture more of the CTV market. For me, it's not about, is it the right move? I really still have questions around how well they can do it. I'm not saying they won't. I just want to see this play out. That's where my mind's at.
Well,
I hope that's helpful.
That's a really good point. It was certainly one of my questions. I mean, AdTechGod, you mentioned, obviously the trade desk, they have a decent engineering function over there as part of their company. But what they have built is really enterprise software, not consumer, like a consumer-facing operating system on a TV that will go to, potentially millions, tens of millions of consumers versus a buying platform for kind of nerdy programmatic people like me. Like, that is a very different proposition. It's a whole different kind of development and UI and testing, and product roadmap. So I do think I'm not saying they can't do it because they obviously have some resources, but it's a bit of a leap for sure.
Tony, you mentioned something. You announced your partnership with the trade desk around UID 2.0. I've received a few messages since yesterday when I saw the website that they had accidentally leaked the headline. So thank you, The Current. One of the biggest things was they own the demand. They have the UID. They have OpenPath, which they're, obviously putting some pressure on publishers to implement and utilize. Now they have an OS. And how much of this is control? Like, control over the CTV space. Is this good for the overall ecosystem? Is this not good for the overall ecosystem? Even though we know that they're not going to get 50 million television sets into the market tomorrow. We know that this is a long strategy and implementation of their tech and development. But is this one more step closer to the consumer and one more step of kind of controlling the CTV space? And is that good or bad for the space? And this can really go to anyone.
I might put one thing out there because I can see, I think Shiv's going to weigh in with some good points on this, but I will say
he's ready.
I could tell, but I was looking at the Trade Desk website earlier today. I think a few of us have just been gathering info, trying to understand what's going on. And they had a video. I'm not sure. I think it may have been from their internal all hands yesterday, but there's a video of Jeff Green talking about this. And I found it interesting that he went to lengths to emphasize and re-emphasize that the trade desk's key client is advertisers. he said it multiple times. Like, our clients are advertisers, our clients aren't the end user. And I found that very telling. And, obviously I'll let the others weigh in here. But for me, I think this, taking them at face value, this just builds on what is already a formidable business. They have built their business on, a more open ecosystem than certainly some of the walled garden options out there. And I think this just expands that a little. But I don't know. It's still those things. I just need to see adoption before I get worried.
Yeah, they're moving from partner territory into frenemy territory for you guys, right, Tony? So it's like that's a interesting dynamic that you guys and Samsung and Roku, everyone's now like having meetings, and I'm sure you guys are going to have meetings like, wait, what's going on here? We got to keep an eye on these guys now all of a sudden because they're our competition. I think it's probably whiplash for Roku because Roku went from having one view and competing directly head to head against the trade desk to saying like, you know what, this one view thing is too hard. The DSP ecosystem's already kind of spoken. We're just going to focus on our OS and our ACR data and our great inventory. And like, that's it. And so we'll partner with the trade desk, and now all of a sudden whiplash, like, trade desk's back and competing with you again, So I'm sure that's an interesting conversation over at Roku. But to your point, AdTechGod, like, I think that it's good. I think in general it's good. I think we all agree here, right? Tony, Scott, it seems like you guys generally agree. Like, it's good. More competition. They bring a spigot of demand into the ecosystem, more innovation, like more money, basically, to help CTV grow. And that's exciting. More money back to the publishers, potentially, all good things. I think the thing that we have to realize is, first of all, to Tony's point, when he heard the Jeff Green all hands, I don't think it's about them appealing to consumers at the end of the day. That's not the product they're building. They're building the Intel inside, I believe, based on the Sonos stuff. They're not building UIs, right? They're not building UX. They're building an OS just to be the backbone. And so I don't think they care too much about that. And I think they can be successful there, probably because of what I said. And Scott, you kind of disagreed with me, which I think is totally fair. But my point was like, I think user experience in CTV is a commodity, at least right now, until the iPad or the Tesla of CTVs comes out. Right now, it's all the same. And so trade desks, like, we don't care. Like, it's easy for us to bring a UX to market that just looks and feels like all the other UXs. And so I don't think there's a lot of pressure from that perspective. I think, to Tony's point, we have to see it play out. They have to get the deals in place. They have to start working with some OEMs. And to your point, AdTechGod, like, it's good until it's not good. And what I mean by that is like, this is what happened with Google. And now this is already happening with the trade desk where it's like, oh, good, like more data, more money into the ecosystem. Oh, wait, hold on. They're
right. And I'm getting a lot of that, Shiv. Like, I get a lot of that. I don't know why people come to me like I'm a confessional booth, but I get a lot of that. I wonder why,
right? Why do I have all these supplicants?
Yeah. Like, they're doing exactly what Google's doing. They're trying to dominate the CTV space. They're dominating the demand space. They're bypassing all the SSPs. They're going to hurt the SSPs. Now they're going after publishers. They're forcing us on their open path product. They want us forcing us to put UID. And, you have to kind of step back and go, okay, like, totally understand. Like, every company needs to scale and grow their business, and they do what they need to do to grow. Again, unlike many other people, I give Google a lot of credit. Like, if you're going to court for being a monopoly, you've really kicked ass. Like, you've really done such a good job that you've built up a business that, like, you've dominated the industry. It's good, but it's also bad. And it makes me wonder, like, is that where we're going to be 10 years from now with the trade desk? Maybe, maybe not. Or maybe there's intentions that are happening where they recognize what they're doing and they're going to hold back when they need to. So, and I believe in Jeff, and I think he's genuinely a good person and cares about his company and the industry. So I'm hopeful that that's the path he takes.
I think they see a market opportunity here, and there's just so much. As I look at the CTV space, like, it's ripe for disruption at almost every point in the value chain. We can kind of argue the point whether or not the experience is good or commoditized right now, but I think there's all forms of kind of consumers of a product like this that would benefit from them doing it really well. We talk a lot about national advertisers. We deal with a lot of national advertisers who do local media, and so therefore we do a lot of local media. I think options for local media have really degraded over the last couple of decades with the rise of digital. Like, a lot of local businesses used to have their local TV reps, their local radio and newspaper reps. And that really has not, sure, now you're on Google and Facebook, But like a lot of the upper funnel premium sight sound motion kind of high impact stuff, it hasn't really been replicated in a way that's meaningful. If like best case scenario, Trade Desk does this well, they're able to get scale, they're able to really pull a lot of these sources together into something that feels like one thing. I think there's a huge market that's hungry for better solutions. So I think good on them for giving it a try. I don't know if this makes them unable to say they're agnostic. I think, like I said at the top, the devil's in the details on that. It depends on how they do it. A large public company is going to pursue their interests. The larger they get and the more interest they have, the heavier that's going to feel to the market. I think they can do this in a way that does not, maybe in 10, 15 years land them in trouble with the FTC.
I have two things I'd love to add there. One takes me back to what we were talking about up at the front end, but I think, and we don't know, but we're kind of speculating that it's either OS that's a consistent front end, or it'll be an OS that's kind of decoupled from the front end, and the front end will be, created by the respective manufacturer. I worry about that decoupling situation. If I'm at the Trade Desk, I worry about it. If it's just so variable and it drives inconsistency, and you've just not controlling this user experience or advancing it at the same pace everywhere, I think that can create issues. So I would be looking at that really carefully. But then, Scott, I think you're right on with a lot of what you were just saying. In fact, I believe in 2025, one of the surprising big areas of growth for connected TV will be local. And in fact, not even related to today's announcement, but probably helping someone like a Trade Desk, as well as us and others in the ecosystem. Really, it's AI and the creative generation, generative AI applied to the creative unit, meaning the ad unit itself. Because a lot of folks sort of went into it thinking it was this meta Facebook model where you can just go in, click a few things, and it will build an ad for you. But TV is not like that. Scott, you said sight, sound, motion. If you're a corner store hairdresser in middle America, you don't really have the resources to do that. But now you can create a TV ad, potentially buy that using AI, buy your media programmatically, and then have a dispersed footprint. It opens up the market to the long tail. And that's really not where CTV has been until now. So I think, again, really astute comments. And I think next year we'll open it up, not just for who we're talking about, but for everyone.
Awesome. That actually brings us to the end of this podcast. Any final words, Tony, Scott, Shiv, before we sign out?
I have two things to say. I just have a quick question. Lightning round. Will Trade Desk get access to the ACR data by having the OS? Does anybody know?
I don't think anyone knows outside of their walls, but I would assume so. You don't build the OS without the intent to do that. But that's
interesting because cookies have been the lifeblood of programmatic. Cookies are going away. Everything's moving towards CTV. I believe ACR is the analogous version of cookies in CTV land. And so they're like, we need all that data. And that's why we're doing this. Okay. My last thing I'll say is, hey, Tony or Scott, are you guys AdTechGod? Either of you?
I can't say.
You picked it from my voice, didn't you? I should have masked it a bit better.
Technology is incredible, Shiv. Awesome. I really want to thank you all, Tony, Shiv, Scott. Really appreciate you guys coming on today. This was great. I really, really, really appreciate you guys.